good morning, and thank you all for inviting me. This is a great pleasure to be here. Before I begin, I want to thank another person who I think is not here but has played a key role in producing this book, which is the editor, Cliff Cobb. And Cliff is our wonderful editor of the American Journals of Economics and Sociology, and what he has done in this case is helped Mason put together, some dozen articles written over the year to make up this book. And thank you, Cliff. You deserve a tremendous amount of credit for making this possible. Okay, this is a quick take on a lot of information. Again, read the book. Sacred Water, Profane Markets, and this is Mason Gaffney on water. So, and of course Mason lives in Southern California, where he has done a lot of work on water. So a lot of this is about Southern California, but Southern California is kind of third world in many ways. So what he says applies around the world. Well, Ted, yeah, you live in Southern California, so you know. Okay. Okay, so I'm starting, what's the matter with California water? Well, there's all sorts of things: droughts, waste, overpumping, pollution, poverty, expensive and useless projects, and endless demand for more projects, and crumbling infrastructure, and not enough money to fix them. So corruption and growing inequality. Let me place my watch so I can see the time. Okay. And okay, California has periodic severe droughts, always has, should be expected, just like the last drought. They come and they go, and maybe they're going to get worse with global warming, but typical scenes of California. California agriculture wastes an enormous amount of water. California is semi-desert, and yet it's using water as if it were, abundant as in England. And Mason points out in the book that American water law is partly derived from England. Well, England has no shortage of water. They got too much water. So, thirsty crops, low-value crops, irrigated pasture, wasteful techniques, furrow, flood, and sprinkler irrigation, a tremendous loss to evaporation. They've got these open canals that aren't covered. The canals leak, they evaporate. Mason goes at great length in this book into the legal framework of water. And water rights, the most important form of water rights in California, are titles based on use that are attached to land. And it's first come, first served. If your great-great-great-grandfather was the first to take water from a river, that right, so-called, becomes attached to the land and is passed down through the family or to whoever the family sells it to. And it's first come, first served. So you've got senior water rights and junior water rights all lined up in order of first in time, first in line, use it or lose it. And that's another part of it, is to maintain your water right, you have to keep taking that water whether you use it or not. Now, when Mason moved to Riverside, California, he bought this house on top of a hill, and it had an avocado orchard, beautiful avocado orchard, and he used to send me avocados, which got smushed in transit, but anyway. But he showed me, he had the water, and the water was running all the time, and that was to maintain the water right to that orchard, most of which water he didn't need, but use it or lose it. It maintained the property value. Okay. Another problem, severe overdraft of groundwater. Now we're talking about the San Joaquin Valley there, and you can see down the south, the water is coming from depths of now, I think, over 200 feet or 300 feet. That is, people are sticking their pipes down and pumping water, but at some point you get deep enough, you're running into brine rather than water. So, crisis, bring us more water, where the farms are drying up. Pollution. This is agricultural runoff. is very destructive. Salt, arsenic, selenium are a big problem in the lower part of the San Joaquin Valley. Central Valley residents have to drink bottled water because of nitrate pollution. That's from all the fertilizers. Fish are dying in the delta. And the San Joaquin River National Wildlife Refuge, well, it's too toxic for humans in there. That's land that became a wildlife refuge because nobody could farm it. It was too toxic. So much for the wildlife. Pesticide, poverty, unemployment, and illness. This was just in The Guardian 2 days ago, so I grabbed it. Too much water displaces, too much water and mechanization displaces farm workers. I've talked about the tomato harvester elsewhere, but and pesticides, of course, endanger the health. This is from The Guardian 2 days ago. And California is famous for these gigantic water projects. This one is particularly obnoxious because it was built supposedly because Los Angeles was going to dry up and blow away without more water. In fact, Los Angeles had and has plenty of water, provided it undertakes a little basic conservation. But so there was this huge bond issue. It came into operation around 1974. And guess what? They found they had so much water, Los Angeles didn't really want it. So they started distributing it to the giant landowners on the west side. Here is the Delta. This is San Francisco. And these are the big old landowners. Whoops. Okay, page up again. On the west side, who suddenly found themselves, these were some of the biggest landowners in California, suddenly found themselves with lots and lots of cheap water. Surprise. Okay, so, and this is the State Water Project. It continues down the west side. The water is pumped over the Tehachapi Mountains around about in here, whence it goes on to Los Angeles and down to San Diego, where it's mostly used to refill overpumped groundwater. And it costs, I think that was a number in there, about $3,000 per acre foot to deliver water over the Tehachapis, while people down there are getting some water for next to nothing. And now, oh boy, Governor Brown has proposed water tunnels to cross from the Feather River up here across the Delta to bring the water directly through the Delta to the pumps at Mendota. You know, another $16 billion project that everybody's fighting over. So, you know, when will they ever learn? Meanwhile, there isn't funds to fix deteriorating infrastructure. This is the Oroville Dam, which is the source of the water for the State Water Project. Environmentalists actually brought suit, I think 2005, claiming that the spillway was cracked and unsafe. Well, nobody had the money to fix it. Now they really have to fix it. You know, $200 million to fix that spillway. Who benefits from the State Water Project? Well, surprise. The earlier water projects, Central Valley Project, and Mason writes something about that, were subject to the supposed 160 acre limitation, 640 per family. It was never really enforced, but nonetheless, this was supposed to keep the giant landowners from getting free water. They found a way around it. But when you came to the State Water Project, there was no limitations on how big a landowner you could be to get free water or next to free water. So the State Water Project had no limitations. And here are some of the, you know, Tajon Ranch, of course, Getty Oil, Shell Oil, Tenneco, Southern Pacific Land Company. That's the railroads, which got a lot of free land over 100 years ago. And Henry George wrote about the giveaways of land to the railroads. Southern Pacific was supposed to build all of these rail lines, and in exchange it got, you know, a checkerboard of land. In many cases, the railroads never got built, but Southern Pacific still owns the land. So, anyway, this is typical, I'm afraid. And this is one of those pictures that's worth 1,000 words. This is the State Water Project aqueduct running from Tracy. This is Tracy here. This is the reservoir from which the water is pumped up to the canal which runs along here. And what you can see here, these are areas that were developed of agriculture that were developed in case many years ago, often with the Central Valley, with the federal water, and you can see the plots are all pretty small. These are relatively small. There's some big ones in here, but these are relatively small farms. And right along here, this is the land here that got the state water after the state water project came into operation. And you can see these are the farms belonging to the giant landholders. And and here are the old areas, small farmers, relatively small, not that small, and here are the giant landowners who got that state water. So, I mean, I think this picture sort of says it all, or a lot of it. Okay. Whoops. State water project from Tracy South. Next. So, the question that Mason poses is the question that a lot of people have posed. The market, can a free market in water solve California's water problems? And a lot of economists say, yes, of course, all you have to do is liberate the market, and the market will take care of all of these water problems. And this is, of course, the libertarian and Coasian solution. Get the property rights straight, and the market will work its magic. There's Mickey as the sorcerer's apprentice. And this is the issue that Mason addresses in this book. Can property rights and the market solve the water problem? Well, let's see. First of all, Gaffney says water belongs to all of us. So these are sort of three main points. Water and other natural services belong to the public. The water is ours. Water is a common property. Water is life, etc. If you're going to privatize nature, it should not come at the expense of the common good. And if you charge private users for natural services, you actually make the markets function better. And these are key central points here. Okay? Number one, number four. There are four problems, as Mason points out, that the market cannot solve. One of them, as he puts it, some human rights are inalienable. We all have a right to at least decent, clean water. Water belongs to the state as the trustee for all of us, and the state can and should collect taxes and use the revenues to make sure that everyone gets a basic amount of clean water for free. So this is a problem the market cannot solve. This is a problem that the government representing all of us has to solve. Number two, water distribution is a natural monopoly. Very important, because there are huge economies of volume and diseconomies of extent. And people tend to mix up economies of scale. There's economies of volume and diseconomies. That is, volume, yes, extent, no. Okay. So a big water project has to be either managed by the state or licensed and regulated by the state. This is not something the market can do. You have to have government in dealing with water. But once you get big projects, you get corruption. And this is a piece of, again, the state water project. This is absolutely astounding. The Edmonston pumping plant, which sends water over the Tehachapi Mountains into Los Angeles and down to San Diego, almost 3,000 feet. The state water project, it was supposed to be, it was going to generate all of this power from the dams, including the Oroville Dam that we saw crumbling. Well, the state water project uses so much water pumping, it uses almost all of the electricity it generates in pumping the water uphill. Okay. Next problem that markets cannot solve. Markets require motivated sellers. That is, they require people who are willing to sell. You can't just say to somebody, oh, you could make a lot of money selling your excess water. People won't do that, especially not when it comes to things like land or water rights. Sellers, if they get water cheap, they don't even think about selling it for a higher price. And large water holders, large water users are particularly undermotivated. I mean, if you look at Southern Pacific sitting on all of that land, which it doesn't even bother to develop. But they've got so much property, why bother? And so much water. If they had to pay market price for water, all of a sudden they would be facing a cash drain. And that would light a fire under them or light a hose under them, you know. And this is a familiar problem now we know from behavioral economics, which is that willingness to accept is much greater than willingness to pay. And this thanks to the behavioral economists. The wonderful story from Thaler, he bought a bunch of cheap mugs at the corner store, passed them out to the students, and asked them how much they would accept to sell those mugs to someone else. Well, a lot of the students wanted a lot more than the $5 that the mugs cost, because once a mug in hand, all of a sudden it's mine and I want to keep it. So willingness to accept is much greater than willingness to pay. And this goes for environmental amenities in general. People, if you say, what would you be willing to pay to have Yellowstone Park? It's a whole lot less than what would you be willing to accept to have Yellowstone Park taken away and privatized. Well, a lot of people would say, no limit, nothing. There's no amount you could pay me to be willing to give up Yellowstone Park. But, you know, again, private water holders feel the same way. I got my water, I'm not going to give it up, go away. So a market doesn't work very well in things like land or water, especially not water. The fourth problem that markets cannot solve is rent-seeking perverts the market. That is, people scramble to get water rights and hold them by wasting water because, you know, the value is going to go up. I'm going to grab it and sit on it and maybe make a killing selling it later, or who knows. But speculators move in to grab water rights. And Henry George sure saw the speculators operating in California when he was writing Progress and Poverty. So again, the moral is government must charge market rates for the water. That would stop speculation in its tracks. And again, you know, charge by the amount of water used, put land taxes on the land that is benefited by the water, and that was what the Wright Act did 100 years ago. Here's some almond orchards in the Westlands Water District, which was where some of the biggest landowners had. I mean, you can see these almond orchards go on to the horizon. They are so huge. These are some of the same places that you saw the pictures earlier. Okay, states should charge market for water. This will encourage conservation. Of course, underpriced water is overused. That's why you have water shortages. If water is free, people treat it like it's free. And at the moment, urban water is priced much higher than farm water, so urban users subsidize farmers, federal taxpayers subsidize state taxpayers. So if the state were to charge water, and I think Mason had an example that if farm water were charged at $200 an acre foot, that would be enough to pay for all preschool education in California. It's a huge number. And again, as I mentioned, $3,000 per acre foot to bring that state water over the Tehachapi's. So, but if you give water away, you've got a constant water shortage, and then there's always this call to invest more water in supplying more water. So revenues would be huge, and what charging market will offset concentrated, especially because the biggest possessors are the most inefficient users. It's just natural. Like, they cannot manage properly. They are too large. So it will fall harder on low-intensity users and speculators, encourage high-intensity use, more production, more employment. So it's a win-win-win if you tax or charge for water. This is a couple of my favorite quotes from Adam Smith, and he contrasts the large proprietor with the small proprietor. Again, a large proprietor is very wasteful of land. A small proprietor is the most intelligent and successful of users. So I'm a big fan of Adam Smith. Also, the state should charge the same for ground and for surface water. Groundwater, at this point, the state is not even allowed to ask groundwater pumpers how much they're pumping. Right. And of course, the state can't collect the information. I mean, they try to collect it, but it's the pumpers are very much protected. And then people say, oh, well, it's an open access common. No. I mean, look at this big old pump. It's very easy to find out who's pumping, and all you have to do is put a meter on the pump. But of course, that's against the law in California at the moment. Some fallacies that, I've got about 5 minutes, some fallacies that obstruct water pricing. Water rights are real property. No, water rights are licenses issued by the state. They can be changed. The legislatures have a great deal of power to control and price water. So that is a fallacy. This is not like land, not like real estate. Okay? Cost of water is passed on to consumers. Oh my God, if we charged the farmers for water, the price of food would go up. Not so. California sells food into the international markets. The only effect of putting a proper price on water would lead to much more intensive production, and yes, it would drive out the rice and the barley and the irrigated pasture, as it should. So anyway, so you will get both more employment and more production by charging for water. Fallacy number 3, if it's cheap to use local water, you should only charge what the local water costs to supply. Nonsense. As an economist, you should charge on water what it's worth. Gaffney gives some examples, but the value may be 2,000 per acre feet, and you're charging only 20 per acre foot. I mean, that's ridiculous. So, okay, this is how a public market would work. In other words, as a practical matter, how does the state go about charging for water? Well, if you imagine a water master controlling the water that comes down a particular irrigation area, at the moment, these are the folks who have rights. And Pioneer Ditch has the most senior right, Highland Canal has the second, the People's Ditch, and so forth. So these are irrigation districts that have water rights by order of seniority. Ridiculous, because it has nothing to do with who can use the water more efficiently. And here is how you could do it by gathering the information on how much each ditch was willing to pay for whatever volume, put it together, get a water demand schedule, very easy to do, and then charge for water. If the water is scarce, the water price is high. If the water is abundant that year, the price is low. And look at this. Here is our old supply and demand curve. At one particular point and place on an irrigation canal, you can collect a whole bunch of rent by charging for the public water. And that's what you should be doing. And one more comment on the fallacy of private water markets. Mason is taking after this guy of the Environmental Defense Fund, which is sort of sold out to the water marketers. Don't get me started on them. Every subsidy and giveaway engineered by pork barrel politics becomes sacrosanct perpetual property, and taxpayers forever incur ongoing costs of $60 an acre foot or more to deliver water for $3.50 to landowners who can resell it for $400. Now those numbers were from many years ago, but the Environmental Defense Fund has been one of the worst offenders in saying, oh, well, just turn the market loose regardless of the subsidies. So the people of California are rats on the wheel, paying taxes to provide more water to farmers every time there is an emergency. Okay? And conclusion, Again, water belongs to the public, water is life, however you want to put it, and these are 4 points in the last chapter of the book. Equity creates inefficiency. Inequity creates inefficiency, and now you're talking about allocations of water rights, which are based on history, like first come, first served, and political power. And talk about political power, California is rife with examples, including the State Water Project, which had, as far as I'm concerned, a negative benefit-cost ratio right from the start. Equity and efficiency require reciprocity. In other words, if you get something from the state, you owe something to the state. So people who have title to water should pay for the benefits received, either as a charge per gallon of water or per acre foot, or through a land tax, or both. Government has to represent society. That is, society is the first owner of natural resources, whether it's water or land or the sky or the spectrum or anything else. It starts with government representing the public. And finally, ecological limits should be economic limits. That is, environment and economics should work together, because the most ecologically damaging activities are often the least justified economically. And now we're talking about urban sprawl, agricultural sprawl, water sprawl, you name it. So what Mason often says is there are two principles. One of them is highest and best use, which is put land or water or other resources to their highest and best use. And the other thing is conserve for the future, which two principles seem to be in conflict. But rather, he says, no. Highest and best use in the right locations, the right central locations, conservation elsewhere. Highest and best use in the center, conservation around the outside. That way you get the best of both worlds. So